The Zerath Dominion fleet hung in the void like a wall of razors, each vessel sleek and cruel, bristling with weapons designed to crush resistance before it could draw breath. Their reputation had already swept ahead of them. Colonies surrendered at the mere sight of their banners, trembling at the inevitability of subjugation. Within the command chamber of the dreadnought Vathar Ascendant, Admiral Karzul lounged in his command chair, a predator at ease. He regarded the holographic projection of a recently conquered human outpost with the detached amusement of someone watching insects scatter from fire. Another burrow cleansed, one of his lieutenants reported, voice dry, mechanical. Minimal resistance. Their militia fought poorly, with weapons centuries outdated. Karzul allowed himself a chuckle, low and derisive. Of course they did. These humans cling to outdated myths of defiance, but when pressed, they crumble. They are vermin who learn to wear boots. His gaze slid across his officers, noting the faint smirks of agreement. This war grows tedious. We are hunters, and yet our prey offers no challenge. There was murmured laughter, though one officer ventured a hesitant note of caution. Still, Admiral, there are reports, scattered whispers of hidden resistance cells. They say some humans vanish before our fleets arrive, as though they matter, Karzul finished for him, tone sharp as a blade. Let them vanish. Let them scurry into shadows. Shadows do not defeat empires. His confidence carried the weight of centuries of Dominion victories. The Zerath had reduced starfaring species to vassals time and again, and humanity, with its fractured politics and desperate colonies, looked no different. And yet, Karzul felt an ember of irritation, like grit beneath his armor. The humans had not begged quickly enough. Some of them resisted with reckless courage, as if testing the patience of gods. When the fleet arrived at the edge of an unremarkable sector, scouts reported an anomaly, a human vessel, vast and silent, drifting alone in orbit of a barren moon. It bore no registry codes, no beacon, no escort. Its hull was black, absorbing the starlight, geometric lines running across it like veins of shadow. Karzul leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A derelict. Perhaps a colony ship, the censor's officer replied, though its mass exceeds their known constructs. A ripple of amusement spread through the bridge crew. One commander barked a laugh. Humans building something that large. Absurd. They can hardly keep their colonies supplied. The admiral's lips curled in a sneer. So they attempted to craft a monument and left it to rot. Fitting. He gestured lazily with one clawed hand. Initiate full spectrum scan. Peel open its secrets. Perhaps we shall learn how far their delusions extend. The order was routine, nothing more than swatting flies. Energy rippled outward, invisible but immense, probing every plate of the mysterious vessel. The crew expected silence, the hollow echo of an empty shell. Instead, the bridge lights flickered as their instruments strained to interpret what came back. Readings spiked. Systems overloaded. Warning glyphs flared across the display. Admiral, the censor's officer's voice cracked. The vessel is awake. Power surges across every system. Energy readings surpass. He swallowed hard, the words clumsy in his throat. Surpass Dominion Dreadnought class. Karzul froze. For a breath, silence held the bridge. Then, from the void, a voice arrived. Come. Human. Every syllable deliberate. Unidentified foreign fleet. You have performed an unauthorized scan of a classified Terran military asset. This is considered an act of war. Stand down. The bridge erupted with derision. Laughter rolled across consoles. A few officers mimicked the human's monotone. An act of war, one guffawed. From livestock. Another sneered. Do they imagine they can frighten us with scripted words? Karzul did not laugh. His eyes remained fixed on the vessel, now thrumming with pale blue light that ran along its hull in patterns like awakened circuitry. He felt a weight in his chest, irrational, unwelcome. Still, he masked it with disdain. Open fire. A single barrage will scatter this farce. Cannons flared. Beams of annihilation lanced through space, striking the alien black hole. The impact blossomed in silence, brilliant as suns, only to fade, leaving the vessel unscarred. Not untouched, unmoved. Then came the reply. Not thunderous, not savage. Surgical. The ship spoke in light and precision. A single lance carved through the void, striking one of the Dominion cruisers. Its weapons went dark. Another beam followed, striking a destroyer, severing engines from power cores. In less than a minute, 3 warships floated crippled, gutted without being destroyed, as though dissected by a meticulous surgeon. Karzul rose from his chair, every instinct thrumming. This was no derelict, no failed monument. His officers stammered at their consoles, disbelief eroding discipline. What weapon system does that? One whispered. Another croaked. They knew we were here. They were waiting. The calm voice returned, cold as the void. Second warning. Disengage. No bravado. No mockery. Only certainty. It rattled them more than threats ever could. Karzul's jaw clenched. In that moment, he understood the shape of his mistake, though pride clawed at him to deny it. He had treated the humans as vermin, assuming weakness where there had been patience. He glanced at the wounded silhouettes of his ships and felt, for the first time in decades, the faint bite of doubt. He forced his voice steady. Signal the fleet. Full formation. We will crush this machine. But even as the words left him, the unease spread like poison. The mysterious battleship did not act like prey. It moved like a predator testing its claws. And as the bridge crew obeyed his orders, Karzul could not silence the thought echoing in his mind. Perhaps the hunt had just turned. The Dominion fleet reassembled in uneasy silence, a predator gathering its strength after feeling the sting of prey's unexpected fangs. Admiral Karzul stood at the center of the command chamber, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, claws digging into the fabric of his gloves. The wounded silhouettes of his ships drifted across the tactical display, each one a reminder of humiliation he could scarcely comprehend. He had not been bloodied in decades of conquest, yet here, against humans of all creatures, he had been checked like a novice. The human vessel remained motionless, its black hull absorbing the starlight, its lattice of glowing seams pulsing in steady rhythm, like the breath of a leviathan. It did not advance, did not chase the crippled cruisers. It merely waited, patient and unshaken, as if the Dominion's grand fleet were of no more consequence than gnats buzzing in a storm. Admiral, one of his lieutenants began, voice tentative, the scans confirm the structure is not a transport, nor any design registered in our archives. Its power reserves exceed anything we have measured. It should not exist. Karzul's gaze sharpened, and yet it does. There was no laughter now, none of the contempt that had filled the chamber earlier. His officers spoke in hushed tones, as if their voices might disturb whatever slumbering giant they had awakened. Another officer whispered, "Perhaps it is not human. Perhaps they acquired it from another race." But the thought was cut short as the vessel itself spoke again, its voice calm and utterly human. "You ignored the warning. Consider this demonstration final." Without flaring thrusters, without visible effort, the battleship shifted. Space folded around it in a ripple that made instruments scream, and in an instant it appeared behind the Dominion fleet, as though it had simply stepped through the void. Before Karzul could bark an order, pulses of light streaked outward, touching ships across his formation. Not explosions, disabling strikes, slicing through weapon mounts, carving power lines in precise silence. It was disarmament, not slaughter, and that made it worse. His officers shouted over one another, panic fraying discipline. "It's behind us. How did it?" Shields collapsing. Karzul raised his hand for silence, though his own pulse pounded. He watched his fleet falter, crippled ship by ship, until only his dreadnought remained fully functional. The human vessel ceased its assault, settling again into the void with that same maddening patience. A new transmission arrived not from a phantom ship, but from a source deep within Dominion communication bands, as though the humans had simply decided to speak through their systems. The face that appeared was human, weathered, stern, with eyes that carried the weight of deliberate control. "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran Defense Fleet. You will cease your hostilities and withdraw from Terran sectors. You have been warned." Reyes's tone carried no heat, no arrogance. It was the voice of someone stating facts, as immutable as gravity. Karzul's mandibles twitched. "You dare to threaten the Dominion? Do you know what force you challenge?" The human's eyes did not waver. "We know exactly what we face. You mistake our restraint for weakness. That will end today." The transmission cut off, leaving only the silent presence of the battleship. The chamber buzzed with anxious speculation. One officer whispered, "They were waiting for us. All those colonies we thought we destroyed. They were bait," another finished, voice hollow. Every loss, every retreat a lure. The realization settled like lead in Karzul's chest. He remembered the humans who had fought too hard, who had bought time with their lives as though time itself mattered more than victory. He had seen it as desperation. Now he saw it as design. They prepared for us, he muttered, almost to himself. Every defeat we dealt them, they gave us willingly. The truth slithered through the chamber. Humanity had not been stumbling blindly into subjugation. They had been watching, waiting, and bleeding just enough to convince the Dominion of their weakness. All the while, they had built this thing, and perhaps more like it. Karzul turned back to the black leviathan that loomed in the distance. It made no move to attack further. It simply watched, as though daring him to try again. The quiet confidence of its restraint gnawed at him more than destruction ever could. He drew a slow breath, signaled the fleet, regroup and withdraw to safe range. There was stunned silence. One officer stammered, "Admiral, we cannot simply." "We will regroup," Karzul cut in, his tone sharp as broken glass. "I will not bleed my fleet against a weapon we do not understand. Not here. Not now." The lieutenants obeyed, though their eyes betrayed both relief and dread. Retreat was an admission Dominion officers did not make lightly, and yet the alternative felt like walking willingly into a furnace. As the dreadnought began to pivot, Karzul allowed his mask of certainty to crack for the barest instant. A fragment of memory surfaced, his instructors in youth, warning that arrogance was the deadliest enemy of command. He had dismissed it as weakness. Now, staring at the Terran battleship's unblinking silhouette, he felt the truth of it clawing at him. The humans had revealed only a glimpse of their hand, and already his fleet had been humbled. What lay hidden, waiting behind that single ship? How many more of these phantoms lurked in the dark, cloaked in silence, until the Dominion grew bold enough to touch them? The thought chilled him more than any weapon. The Dominion had not found prey in this sector. They had found something else entirely. And as his ships limped into formation, retreating with as much dignity as their damage allowed, Karzul understood that this war was no longer the one he thought he was fighting. The humans had been underestimated, dismissed as vermin. But vermin did not set traps with such patience. Vermin did not bleed strategically. Vermin did not wait for empires to overextend themselves before springing their jaws. The mysterious vessel dwindled into the distance, but its presence lingered in every officer's mind, a silent warning written in fire. For the first time, Admiral Karzul felt the unfamiliar weight of doubt pressing on his shoulders. He knew with grim certainty that the humans were not prey. They were predators who had chosen to stop pretending otherwise. Admiral Karzul's private chamber was dim, lit only by the flicker of holographic projections dancing across the air. He had dismissed his aides and sealed the doors. Alone, he studied the images, scenes from human history intercepted from their endless archives. At first, he had ordered the data compiled as an exercise in mockery, another study in primitive savagery. Yet now, after the encounter, every frame struck him differently. The images showed humanity's wars, their endless appetite for conflict with themselves. Trench lines stretching into muddy horizons where men crawled through filth to die, in heaps. Skies over Dresden burning like suns, entire cities reduced to glowing ash. The sudden light at Hiroshima, white and merciless, erasing lives in a blink. He had thought them primitive atrocities. Now he saw something else, endurance. They had destroyed themselves, rebuilt, and destroyed again. Each wore a crucible forging something harder. They had been training in extinction long before they reached the stars. He found himself whispering the thought aloud, "They do not fear death. They rehearse it." His reflection stared back from the polished surface of the chamber wall, features usually stern but now lined with the first hints of unease. For decades, the Dominion had believed fear was the leash by which civilizations were led. But if humanity wore death like a second skin, then what leash could hold them? A chime sounded, priority summons. Karzul shut down the projection, though the images lingered behind his eyes, and strode to the council chamber. The High Council was already assembled, their forms towering on the central dais, draped in finery that signified centuries of unquestioned dominance. The chamber buzzed with voices, arrogance thick in the air. Some mocked his retreat, others questioned his judgment. To them, humanity was a nuisance, a minor world that had grown too bold. Karzul stepped into the circle, his voice cutting clean through the noise. "You do not understand. They are not what we believed." The council's prime speaker tilted his head with disdain. "Explain, Admiral. Did your fleet not number among the Dominion's strongest? Did you not command overwhelming force? and yet you return with damaged ships and stories of phantoms. The chamber rippled with amusement. Karzul's mandibles tightened, but he forced restraint. This was no phantom. It was a Terran warship. Not scavenged, not borrowed, but built. Built with precision that eclipses anything in our archives. My fleet was dismantled in minutes. Not destroyed, dismantled. They chose not to kill us. That is the measure of their confidence. Laughter rose, dismissive and cruel. One counselor leaned forward. You claim vermin wield tools of gods? Preposterous. Preposterous. Karzul barked, his composure slipping. Then what do you call a vessel that appears behind a fleet without traversing space? What do you call weapons that cripple without fail, that cut with surgical restraint? If this is vermin, then we should fear the day they decide to bare their teeth. His words rang through the chamber, and for a moment silence followed. But silence is not agreement. The counselor's sneer returned. Fear is a luxury of the weak. The Dominion does not fear savages who still paint their history in blood. They will break as all others break. Karzul's chest burned with fury. He saw in their eyes the same arrogance that had blinded him, the same complacency that had nearly cost him his fleet. He realized, bitterly, that his warning would not be heeded. One voice broke the chorus of dismissal. General Veyrak, scarred from campaigns older than most, spoke with quiet gravity. The Admiral speaks truth. I have reviewed his reports. The humans did not stumble into war with us. They prepared. Every lost colony, every retreat was by design. Their restraint was not weakness. It was strategy. The chamber hissed with outrage at the suggestion. Politicians snarled, demanding Veyrak retract. But he did not. He locked eyes with Karzul across the chamber, a rare flicker of solidarity. Still, the council voted, as it always did. Pride triumphed over reason. They declared humanity insignificant, a threat exaggerated by a commander rattled by failure. Orders were issued for further campaigns, for escalation, for crushing what they called the human nuisance. Karzul left the chamber seething, but beneath his rage lay something colder, clarity. The Dominion would not change. They would press forward, blind and arrogant, until the humans answered them fully. On the observation deck, he looked out at the stars, his hands trembling though he hid them behind his back. For the first time, the vastness of the galaxy did not comfort him. It felt smaller, as if the presence of humanity's shadow stretched across every point of light. He thought again of the human admiral's voice, calm, assured, a tone not of triumph, but inevitability. You mistake our restraint for weakness. Those words echoed like prophecy. Behind him, one of his junior officers approached hesitantly. Admiral, if the council refuses to listen, what are we to do? Karzul did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the void, on the place where the black vessel had vanished. At last he spoke, low and deliberate. We prepare. Quietly. If the council insists on blindness, then we will sharpen our eyes in the dark. Because when the humans strike again, they will not do so as prey. The officer shifted uneasily. And if the council is right? If the humans are nothing more than a curiosity? Karzul allowed himself a bitter smile. Then my fear will prove foolish. But if I am right, then it will not be fear we speak of, but survival. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. The officer bowed and withdrew, leaving Karzul alone with the stars. He replayed the footage once more in his mind, the patient vessel, the surgical strikes, the calm human voice. He felt the weight of inevitability pressing against him like a tide. The Dominion would not turn until the storm broke them. And when that storm came, it would not roar. It would whisper, and the galaxy would fall silent. Karzul exhaled slowly, mandibles tightening. For the first time in his long career, he understood what it meant to be afraid, not of death, but of an enemy who did not fear it. The war he thought he commanded was no longer his to shape. It belonged to the humans now. The Dominion assembled its armada in orbit of its capital world, a spectacle meant to reassure the Empire and silence whispers of doubt. Hundreds of ships formed into serried ranks, their hulls glinting like polished blades in the starlight. To the citizens watching from below, it was proof of power, a promise that no threat could endure before the sheer mass of Dominion steel. But to Admiral Karzul, standing on the command deck of the Vathar Ascendant, the display rang hollow. He had seen what numbers meant against the humans. He had watched precision carve apart brute force. And as he stared across the formation, his unease deepened, for he could not rid himself of the memory of that black Terran warship, waiting in silence as if daring him to try again. When the alarms came, they did not blare with the familiar rhythm of an incoming fleet. Instead, they screamed across every channel at once, warning of incursions in places no Dominion ship could respond to quickly enough. Wormholes tore open in the outer sectors, disgorging swarms of Terran drones that struck supply lines with surgical precision. Automated weapons platforms blinked into existence above key outposts, dismantling defenses before they could even pivot. Reports cascaded in, each one more improbable than the last. Convoys intercepted before they left dock, arsenals gutted, entire fleets paralyzed without a single Terran loss recorded. The counselors panicked, voices shrill and overlapping, demanding explanations. Karzul ignored them, focusing on the rhythm of the strikes. It was no random campaign of vengeance. This was a demonstration, carefully choreographed to make clear the futility of resistance. Humanity had mapped the Dominion's veins, and now they pressed them closed with calm precision. And then, as though to silence all doubt, the black battleship appeared again, materializing at the edge of the capital system as if it had always been there, waiting unseen. Its emergence sent ripples through the formation, captains stumbling over orders, shields flaring preemptively. The vessel did not fire. It advanced slowly, deliberately, its shadow falling across the Dominion fleet. Admiral Reyes's voice followed, calm and unyielding. Dominion command. We warned you. This is your final chance to stand down. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted over one another, demanding the annihilation of the intruder. To them, retreat would mean the collapse of centuries of dominance. To Karzul, annihilation was no longer an option. He could see the trap laid bare. The humans wanted them to attack, to throw everything at the Leviathan, to spend their fury against an enemy that had already calculated every strike. But the Council's order was absolute. The armada surged forward, filling space with a storm of fire. Energy beams crisscrossed like rivers of molten light, torpedoes streaking toward the solitary ship. And yet, as before, the human vessel absorbed the storm without flinching. Shields shimmered, patterns shifting like liquid glass. Then the counterstrike came. It was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was precise, merciless efficiency. Swaths of Dominion warships lost power in synchronized bursts, their engines gutted, their weapons neutralized. Entire wings of fighters dissolved in controlled detonations before they could close range. Ships that had stood for centuries, veterans of countless campaigns, were dismantled in seconds by fire too exact to be anything but deliberate. Karzul gripped the edge of his command chair, torn between awe and despair. His fleet, the pride of the Dominion, was unraveling before his eyes. The humans did not fight like rebels or opportunists. They fought like an empire long practiced in the art of annihilation, and only now revealing what it had learned in secret. Through the chaos, Reyes's voice cut across the void once more. We do not seek your destruction. Surrender and live. Persist, and we will finish what you began. The words struck harder than the weapons. Karzul's officers exchanged uneasy glances, their arrogance shattered. Even the most zealous among them could no longer deny the truth. Their empire was not facing rebellion. It was facing replacement. The council still screamed, demanding resistance, urging Karzul to rally what remained. He muted them with a flick of his claw. For the first time, he felt the full weight of command pressing down, not the command of a fleet, but the command of a choice that would decide whether his species endured or perished. He thought of the human wars he had studied, the endless cycles of destruction and rebuilding. He thought of Reyes, his voice neither cruel nor vengeful, but calm with the certainty of one who already knew the outcome. Karzul rose. "Cease fire," he ordered, his voice steady though his chest burned with the shame of it. "Signal surrender." Gasps filled the chamber. Officers balked, counselors shrieked through the channels, but the command was given, and the Dominion fleet faltered into silence. One by one, the remaining ships powered down their weapons, their shields collapsing in resignation. The human vessel held its place, watching. Then, after a long pause that stretched like eternity, Reyes spoke again. "Wise." The black ship did not finish them. It did not sweep in for the kill. It simply hovered, as if satisfied that the point had been made. Wormholes closed across the Dominion borders, fleets withdrawing as swiftly as they had arrived. The silence that followed was heavier than any bombardment. Karzul remained standing, his claws clenched so tight they drew blood. He had surrendered what no Zerath commander had ever dared, but he knew it had spared them from extinction. His pride burned, yet beneath it lay a strange, sobering clarity. The Dominion was no longer the center of power. The humans had taken that place, not with triumph, but with inevitability. When Reyes appeared again on the display, Karzul met his gaze without defiance. The human regarded him with a soldier's weariness, not a conqueror's pride. "You will live, Admiral," Reyes said. "Your people will live. But the age of the Dominion is over. You will serve in a different capacity now, as witness, as warning. We have no need for corpses." Karzul inclined his head, the gesture small, but weighted with the surrender of a lifetime of certainty. He could not speak, the words caught in his throat. Yet he understood. He had been spared not as a courtesy, but as a reminder, to his people, to the galaxy, perhaps even to himself. As the transmission ended and the human ship withdrew into silence, Karzul felt the full enormity of what had shifted. The Dominion's banners might still fly, but they no longer meant dominion. They meant submission. Humanity had not celebrated, had not roared its victory. It had simply stepped into the role of master with a calmness more terrifying than rage. In the stillness that followed, Karzul whispered to himself, the truth finally undeniable. They were never prey. They were predators who chose patience. And across the galaxy, word spread, not of the Dominion's power, but of its collapse, and of the new force that had risen in its place. Humanity, long underestimated, had spoken its first true warning, and the stars would never be the same again.